Yeah, we got another round of Miami Hurricanes official visits in the rearview mirror, but when are the actual commitments from that going to start to drop?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers who make Locked On Canes your first listen each and every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. I know that over the weekend, the Florida Gators got a bunch of commits, and Miami fans are getting a little impatient because you had a lot of important visitors on campus this week. I believe within the next couple of days, something, if not multiple things, are going to drop. So stay tuned, my friends. I do think we're going to start to very soon seeing, more of the fruits of this staff's labor. So hopefully within the next 48 hours, some of you can stop complaining. But let's talk about how this past weekend went. Smaller, more intimate than the weekend prior, where the Canes had 14 official visitors. They had 6 official visitors and some unofficial visitors, including somebody committed somewhere else. We'll get to that a little bit later. But for how the visits went this weekend, let's start with 4-star running back Kevin Riley out of Tuscaloosa County High School in Alabama. Now, Miami were considered favorites coming into the weekend, and I think Miami really made a move for Riley. And I have been given the impression that Kevin Riley is their top target right now at running back, and that Miami thinks that he and Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, the Hellcat, could provide the perfect combo for this class, that they want that to be the running back combo. And Wheatley-Humphrey is already verbally committed to Miami. Miami really wants to add Kevin Riley, who's a great, well-rounded back, into that class. And yes, I considered Miami to be the favorites going into the visit. I consider them even stronger favorites coming out of it. I think Kevin Riley is going to end up being a Miami Hurricane. It's only a matter of when. As far as his timeline goes, I guess at least other schools hope he's keeping an open mind for the fall. But as for the summer, he's got no more official visits planned. Miami was his last trip of the summer, despite there being another open weekend. So if Riley does end up visiting anywhere else, it wouldn't happen until the fall. So I think Miami's in a really good spot for right now with him. Now, of course, the real headline maker of the visitors, and I didn't lead off with this one because I don't know as much, but the real headline maker was 5-star defensive tackle Justin Scott out of Chicago, Illinois. I was asking a few friends for feedback on Justin Scott last night and this morning, and nobody seems to know too much. And apparently the reason for that is, I saw Gary Furman posting about this on Cane Sport, is apparently Scott isn't really doing any interviews right now. Like, he's not doing any exit interviews coming out of the weekend, which is where people like me get a lot of information from, okay? Now, there is buzz that the visit went very well for Justin Scott, and I think Gabby Urrutia at 24/7 did note that Miami is still in really good shape for Scott. And yeah, Miami, they're still considered the favorites, even a strong favorite for Justin Scott. I have no reason to believe that has changed. The intel is just a little bit scarce right now because he seems to be keeping his process very quiet, which is his right, especially being a 5-star player. Everyone wants to know what's going on. How was the visit? Who's the favorite? He's keeping things close to the vest right now. As far as other schools, I still consider, after Miami, probably the distant second would be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And I think they're playing rope-a-dope right now. They're basically sitting back and letting Miami shoot their shot right now, and then Notre Dame is sitting back, waiting until the fall, which is when they'll probably make a heavier push for him. I was told a couple weeks ago that the Irish are going to try to get him on campus for an OV during the season, not over the summer, and that's always been their focus with him. So hopefully Miami can take such a huge lead for Justin Scott that it becomes too late for Notre Dame to try to get back into it. Let's talk about 4-star edge rusher Elias Rudolphin. There's no question that Miami improved their position here, okay? Heading into the weekend, and we talked about this on our Saturday morning episode with Chalupa Batman, and I said this to Chalupa that I didn't really like Miami's chances. I thought they were slim to none with Elias Rudolph. I think the Hurricanes are at least in the game right now. I think they're still playing from behind. Jason Taylor, defensive line coach, is working this one hard, and Elias Rudolph came out of this visit really impressed with JT. He told 24/7 Sports that Miami made a huge impact for him this weekend. So with Rudolph, he's not really a South Florida kid, but he plays in South Florida now. Like, he just moved to Deerfield Beach from Cincinnati, Ohio. So his recruitment to this point has been almost entirely Big Ten. Michigan got some crystal balls for him last week. They are considered to be the favorites. He's going to be visiting Ohio State this coming weekend. So I think Miami's in the game now for him, but, however much contact they're able to maintain with him between now and his announcement date, by the way, he wants to announce on July 3rd. So he plans, Elias Rudolph, to announce a verbal commitment on July 3rd. This is a 4-star edge rusher now at Deerfield Beach High School. But Michigan considered the favorites. Miami, I think, are in the game now. Ohio State is going to get a visit coming up this weekend. So that's how it's looking for him. How about my guy Schmo? Yes, we get the Schmo down to South Florida. Here we go. Moritz Schmoranzer, 3-star offensive lineman. He's now playing in Virginia, but he's from Germany. He grew up in Deutschland. Here's what the Schmo told On 3 about his Miami visit. The vibe of the city was just incredible, he said. I've never seen anything like that, and I've never felt anything like that. Just the people, the diversity, the food, the team, the coaching staff, the whole university. It's just different than anyone else. And that is something that we talk about this sometimes with international players. Like, growing up in Europe, you're going to get a little bit more. And obviously there's a lot of, Latin flavor, South American flavor, Caribbean flavor down here, a little European flavor as well. Like, it's just so many cultures, like, all in one area down here in South Florida. It's going to feel a little bit more European down here than it's going to feel in a lot of the college towns out there. Now he is visiting Pittsburgh this coming weekend, Schmo, which is not a bad town. Like, I've been to Pittsburgh before. My sister lived there for a few years. Like, Pittsburgh, it's a lot better than Cleveland or something like that, right? It's a lot better than, like, the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. But I mean, Pittsburgh, it cannot compete with Miami. So hopefully Miami can keep making moves with Schmo. Another one who visited is a recent Penn State decommitment, and that's Deryc Plazz, 3-star offensive lineman. It's become a Miami versus NC State battle for him. So it's ACC versus ACC for him. It sounds like he and his family really like Miami. So Deryc Plazz's decision just may come down to what happens on his NC State OV this coming weekend. He's visiting there this weekend. Here's what he told On 3 about Miami and NC State. He says, Miami and NC State are the top two. It's still pretty close, he says. What made Miami jump out is just being around the guys. And when they took us through the city, it's definitely a place I can fit in. I can thrive off being here. So I like that. Now, when we come back, we have some interesting news on arguably the top player in the entire class, who his official visit plans to Miami have been evolving over the past week. And I think this is where we stand now with Jeremiah Smith. And wow, there's a linebacker who's verbally committed to Florida that Miami seems to be trying to flip right now. So you're going to get that and much more. We're only getting started, folks, on this episode of Locked On Canes. I'm only getting started this summer on FanDuel. Make it the summer of FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel. That's America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You have nothing to lose on that first bet, because if you lose, you get it right back in bonus bets. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. You are going to love how easy it is to get signed up, how safe and secure the app is, and how easy it is to deposit and withdraw. You get your money instantly. And folks, with the Marlins doing pretty well, with there's a lot of international soccer going on, I was betting UFC fights over the weekend. The MMA never stops. There's always something going on this summer on FanDuel. So I encourage you to check it out and do not miss your chance to snag a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. And for the everydayers, if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, guys, I encourage you to join our exclusive SMS texting service through Subtext. I include a link in the show description below. This is a great time of year to be signed up because we've got recruiting updates on the Subtext just about every single day. We have show notes and show previews for you guys. On this episode, we're going to be answering questions that some of you asked me on the Subtext chat. So there's a lot of added value on there. You can sign up, try it completely free for the first 14 days. And then if you want to opt in after 2 weeks, it's $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there. Click the link in the show description below to get started, my friends. So, all right, with Jeremiah Smith, arguably the top player in the entire class, 5-star receiver out of Chaminade-Madonna, local kid, but he's been verbally committed to Ohio State for several months. But he's kept his recruitment open enough that he's taken visits. He's letting programs shoot their shot. And originally, as of a few days ago, we thought that Jeremiah's official visit to Miami was just going to be a one-day thing, which is, a one-day official visit when they're usually at least 48 hours. That kind of feels like a courtesy or a throwaway. His plans have apparently evolved and changed for the good for Miami's side. According to Frank Tucker from Miami Rivals, Jeremiah is now going to be visiting the full weekend. So it's not a one-day midweek. He's now taking the full weekend, June 23rd through the 25th. Official visit this weekend at Miami. Other notable players who are going to be on campus this weekend, a handful of guys who are already committed to Miami verbally, and a handful who are not. Chance Robinson. And guys, I know that there's definitely been some concern about Chance, possibly flipping somewhere else. There's been some Gator buzz. There's been some Penn State buzz for him. We're going to know a lot more based on how Chance comes out of this weekend, the 4-star wide receiver out of St. Thomas Aquinas, because Miami, they get the opportunity to try and solidify his commitment this weekend with his official visit. So hopefully that goes well. Judd Anderson, the ambassador, is going to be there this weekend. I love the idea of Judd being on campus at the same time as Jeremiah Smith, because if there's anyone who can preach that Canes gospel to Smith, the ambassador is the guy to do that. Jalen Hayward, who's a Georgia commit, Miami's trying to flip, is going to be there. Chris Cole, the linebacker we really like, who is the grandson of Bob Marley, the nephew of Rohan Marley, will be there. Dylan Williams, the linebacker out of Long Beach Poly, will be on campus. I like him. Isaiah Thomas, who's committed to Miami already, the safety. We've had him on the show before, and so many others will be on campus. So hopefully Jeremiah is feeling the love and feeling the brotherhood on campus this weekend. And, you just have to hope that Miami gives him something to think about, okay? If you want to try to flip that player from his Ohio State commitment, which will not be easy, I absolutely favor Ohio State to secure Jeremiah Smith. Miami is definitely playing from behind here, but if you want to have any chance to flip him, not only do you have to hit it out of the park at the OV this weekend, but you've actually got to win games and score a lot of points and make the passing game look fun this year. So, if you're going to flip Jeremiah, it's not going to happen next week or this weekend. You're chopping wood, as we like to say in the recruiting game. You're chopping that wood away, which, by the way, I know that in the opening segment, I didn't talk about Jaden Jackson. I neglected to mention him. Didn't have as much intel on the 4-star defensive lineman out of IMG Academy, but I did see Gabby Urrutia describe Miami's work with Jaden as chopping wood. Okay, so maybe Miami's making more progress there, and you've got to chop some of that wood with Jeremiah Smith as well. All right, let's answer some of your questions. We got some really good questions on our Subtext platform. You can also ask us questions on Twitter. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. You follow us at Locked On Canes, and we will follow you back. Locked On Canes on Twitter. If you ask us questions there, we can use those on the Q&A as well. We get this question from our guy Leeds on the Subtext. He says, "Hey, as success in recruiting grows, how do you feel about the coaches having extra pressure to increase the number of quality players getting playing time and keeping everybody somewhat happy?" That's a real thing everywhere in college football, and that's why the transfer portal is so popular, right? Because in the old days, if you weren't getting playing time, it was a real pain in the ass to transfer. Like in the old days, like, oh, I got to sit out a year. I got to get permission from my coaches to transfer somewhere. These days, I'm not saying the transfer portal is easy, but it's a lot easier than it used to be. So listen, all these coaches can do two things. Number one, you are honest with every player about where they stand, because the last thing you want is to blow smoke up a player's what, and then they get disgruntled because, like, wait, coach told me I was a starter and I'm riding the pine. Why did he lie to me? That's work. Like, it's one thing to, be on the bench and the coaches explain to you exactly why. It's another thing to lie to players. I know Miami's coaches, that's something they avoid. They try to avoid at all costs, and Cristobal is known for his honesty. So you need to be honest with players as to where they stand. And listen, sometimes if a player isn't getting playing time and they want to transfer, that's okay. Okay. Sometimes, you want the best thing for these young men. But then the other thing is, of course, you have to make sure the best players are always getting on the field. That's why you don't promise playing time for nothing, right? Because then if you promise certain players you're going to be a starter or a heavy rotation guy, and they're playing against they're playing ahead of someone who should be on the field, that creates way more problems with the locker room, right? Because if players start to feel like coaches have favorites and they're giving playing time for no reason other than, making promises to guys or NIL payments, stuff like that, you don't want any of that stuff happening. So, best players are going to get on the field. But something that Miami's coaches really try to do is, and they're very detailed with this, when they're recruiting players, they give them that 3-year plan or that 4-year plan or that 5-year plan. That was something that Colin Simmons, the 5-star edge rusher, talked about. Like, he had never seen as detailed of a 3-year plan for his own career as the ones Miami's coaches presented him with. Like, and again, playing time is not promised in there, but they explain to you, this is what your career trajectory could look like. This is the type of role we see you playing for in our defense or our offense, and how you can compete and get on the field. So you want to be as detail-oriented as possible with that 3-year, 4-year plan, whatever it is. And you also want to be honest, because players like to know no BS. They like to know where they stand. So that's all you can do to manage that, Leeds. And listen, sometimes if you have too much depth, that's a great problem to have. And if you have too much depth, players are going to transfer, and it is what it is. You got to hope you're deep enough to absorb when players transfer. You've got a plan B and a plan C. We get a question from Paul. Paul says, hey, I haven't heard many recruits mention Lance Guidry. I would presume he's a great recruiter given his personality, as opposed to Kevin Steele, he says, who appeared to be in zombie mode as a recruit. Yeah, I don't know if that's fair. I mean, Kevin Steele was older. He wasn't as bubbly as Guidry, obviously, but I think Steele could be, he could be a little bit energetic at times, but that's neither here nor there. He says, can you give us some insight on Lance Guidry as a recruiter? Well, one of the reasons why you don't see his name get brought up that much is, as a coordinator, he's not usually like the primary recruiter. The primary recruiter is usually a position coach for players, but obviously the coordinators are very involved with this stuff. And yes, he is a very energetic, well-spoken, fun Cajun. I'd love to get a beer with this dude. Guidry has a great personality. But outside of that, I was told by a couple of defensive recruits that I've talked to over the past few months that Guidry, he really lets his scheme and his ideas speak for him. And this kind of goes into what I was talking about with the detailed 3-year plans and stuff, that players are very attracted to Lance Guidry's defense. So he can kind of let the film and the stats speak for themselves, because his defenses are friendly for a lot of big plays, a lot of turnovers, and a lot of disruption, which means players are, for a defensive player, getting a turnover is just an awesome, awesome hype moment. And you have a chance to put up stats in his defense. So anytime he recruits a player, he has a very clear vision of how that player is going to fit into his defense. He's very technical. That was something I talked about with Isaiah Thomas, the Miami safety commit, when he was on the show about a month and a half back. He really told me he likes the fact that Guidry specializes in his position group, that he's a safety guy, and that Guidry had a very detailed vision of where Thomas can fit in his defense and how he can play multiple different roles. And That's also something that I noticed this on both sides of the football, but defense included. Miami has really emphasized recruiting versatile players, guys that can fit in multiple roles, play multiple positions, line up in multiple spots. That way, players love that. Like, players love the idea to be used creatively, and then it also covers your butt, right? In case you have injuries and depth issues, you're able to move guys into certain other spots. So that's all I can tell you. And listen, I've never been actually recruited by Lance Guidry, but I can tell you that not only his personality, but his attention to detail and just how fun his defense is to play in, a lot of that stuff just speaks for itself with him. Okay. Got a couple of other good questions, including my takeaways on the interview that Josh Pate did with offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, because I thought there were some really interesting nuggets that came out of that, and it gave Hurricanes fans a chance to know Shannon Dawson a little bit better, because you don't hear from him as often as you hear from Mario Cristobal, who Pate also interviewed. But the Shannon Dawson one was very illuminating. We will get to that and more right here on Locked On Canes. Keep it locked. And guys, after you make us your first listen, make sure you make Locked On NBA Draft your second listen. Locked On NBA Mock Draft Special. It's here, and it's bigger than ever. Follow along the entire first round in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. And for the everydayers, we are going to have on, I think tomorrow afternoon, we're going to talk more recruiting with Brian Smith, our recruiting expert, who's a colleague of mine at allhurricanes.com, and he is the recruiting overlord of the Locked On Network. This week, I believe we're going to track down another former Canes player. Another Canes legend is going to be joining the show alongside the truth teller, Bruce Warner, this week. So we've got a big week of shows coming up here on Locked On Canes. So we get this question from Quasi, or is it Quasi? I'm going to call him Quasi. He says, hey, would love to know your thoughts on the Josh Pate interview with Miami's OC. I just recently listened to it, and my favorite part of it was hearing him take into account he made a bad play call, and he wants our QBs to call him out on it or let him know they think something is bad. I think the OC quarterback relationship will be better this year. That is the sort of, you have to be strong and you have to be a leader, but no one is infallible. And I think Shannon Dawson is willing to admit that, hey, sometimes I'm going to make a bad call, or you're going to see something as a quarterback that I'm not going to see. And we need to have a partnership, that this is not a my way or the highway type of thing, that if you see something that I don't, we need to collaborate. Right. I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on that. I don't think the previous offensive coordinator, from the 1,000 stories that I heard about him, was a very good collaborator. So far, so good with this one with Shannon Dawson. So I think that's important, and something that I've talked about with quarterbacks. When we spoke the media to Tyler Van Dyke a couple times during spring football, he emphasized this. I've spoken to Judd Anderson multiple times, who was recruited by Shannon Dawson. He emphasized this. Quarterbacks really like the way Shannon Dawson is willing to give them more freedom in his offense than you get in a lot of other offenses. So I think some of that collaboration comes with the freedom you get in that offense. Okay. Some other things that stood out to me about that interview with Pate was, the Dawson, he's not saying the offense is perfect, but as far as the installation goes, right, just installing the playbook, he says they got everything installed in spring, which is great. He thinks the mentality is great, and that he says the players Miami has are good enough to make plays, and they've even added some more since spring football. So it's only gotten better, because they've added a couple of important receivers and an important running back, among others, since spring football. He says, does Dawson, the difference in his offense and the difference in a good offense versus a shaky offense, it's how you program your quarterback. He says, if something doesn't make sense to Tyler Van Dyke, then it doesn't matter what I know, is what he said, that it's his job to make sure Tyler Van Dyke understands it. He says, I'm just trying to program Tyler's mind to where he can execute our offense. And he says it needs to be simple on Miami's end, but your simple offense needs to look complex to opponents. So those were some of my top takeaways from Shannon Dawson. And I'm really happy he's here. And I'm really happy that the 24/7 channel and the Late Kick with Josh Pate was able to give us, that sort of access and insight to what the offensive coordinator is thinking, because that was really good. Question from the 561. Where does Miami stand with the next class? 2023, the focus was on offensive line. 2024, clearly the focus is on the defensive line. What will be the focus of 2025? Woo! I mean, we're not even that close to the finish line with 2024. I will say, I think in 2025, they're going to cycle back to more offensive line heavy. And I think 2025, they're going to try to land a blue chip quarterback. So I think that those are, I think that those are some areas that could be hopefully really strong in that class, because I agree with what you said. 2024 looks like it's going to be the year of the defensive line. We get this question from the 262. He says, hey, considering linebacker Adarius Hayes as our top target at linebacker, and listen, that's a perfect segue, because you may have heard the name Adarius Hayes. If you follow recruiting, you're thinking, wait, I thought that was a Florida verbal commit. Well, it's been confirmed. Adarius Hayes, 4-star linebacker, did make an unofficial visit to Miami over the weekend and was really impressed. Now, he is a Florida verbal commit, which means I can already tell you there's going to be Gator fans in our YouTube comments like, Miami sucks. 3-star Mario, you're not going to take our 4-star line. 3-star Mario is not taking our 4-star linebacker. Miami's definitely trying, and it's my understanding they're making progress there with Adarius Hayes. And I think what the question was referring to with him being our top linebacker target, that was something Gabby in 24/7 did describe Adarius Hayes as now Miami's top linebacker target. So this is a Florida verbal commit that Miami appears to be making some progress with and chopping that wood, so to speak. That's been the phrase of the day. So we want to keep him in mind. So he says, hey, considering linebacker Adarius Hayes as our top target at linebacker, alongside our pursuit of Chris Cole and James Nesta and the commitments of Cameron Pruitt and Vincent Shavers, do you think we will recruit a total of 5 linebackers this year? Alternatively, would we need to make room by potentially replacing someone if all 5 commitments were secured? I'm also curious if there's still an unlimited recruiting cap like last year, or if it is returned to the 25-player limit. It's not returned to the limit this year. The talk is if that does happen, it may happen next year. I think they should just keep it as is, because with the transfer portal being as big as it is right now, I don't feel like they should be capping recruiting classes. I hope that they keep it uncapped, but there is no 25-player cap. To my knowledge, there is no cap this year. You can have a bigger than 25-person class. He says, could you also provide your expectations for the number of recruits at each position? I'll have to save that for a longer segment in an episode, but let me say on linebackers, as far as right now, they've got 2 in the class in Pruitt and Shavers. You're talking about hypothetically taking 5. I don't think it's going to be that many, because you're assuming Miami lands all 3 of the guys that they're pursuing right now. They're pursuing Adarius Hayes. Let's remember, he still is a Florida commit, so the flip is not automatic. Miami loves James Nesta, but I think we have to be a little bit worried about Oklahoma, okay? I don't think Miami wanted him to take that Oklahoma visit. He did take it over the weekend. Oklahoma's a real threat there. I would love to have Nesta here, and Miami probably, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, because I don't know for sure, but I still feel like Miami is probably at least a slight favorite for Nesta, but I'm concerned about Oklahoma. And then Chris Cole, who I love, is visiting this weekend, but that's not a slam dunk, because Georgia wants Chris Cole. So I think there's going to be some serious competition there. So I don't know. I'm not going to assume that they land all 3 of those guys. I'm thinking maybe they land 1 or 2 of those guys. So I think Miami's probably going to end up with about 5 linebackers in the class. I think that's what we're probably looking at. Man, we got a bunch more questions. We're going to have to do another Q&A later this week. Question from David T. He says, is a top 7 class still achievable? Yes. So last year, the verbal commits didn't really start rolling in until the last week of June, first week of July, and Miami ended up with a top 7 class. We're basically probably even in slightly better position than we were this time last year, but we're basically in the same spot we were in last year prior to the final week of June. So yes, a top 7 class is still on the table. We will answer more of your questions later on this week because we got more than we could handle today. Guys, make sure for the everydayers, you think about signing up for our exclusive subtext SMS texting service, link in the show description below. And you keep tuning in all week for all the awesome guests and all the awesome shows we have planned. Here's a programming note. Some of our episodes this week might drop a little bit later in the day than they usually drop because from Tuesday through Friday, I'm going to be filling in starting tomorrow for the rest of the week. I'm going to be filling in for Joe Rose, 6 to 10 a.m. on 560 WQAM. I'll be on with former Cane Brian Monroe. Maybe I'll see if Brian can join me on one of the Locked On Cane shows this week because I'll be doing radio with him for the rest of the week. So with me doing morning radio, it may push back my Locked On Cane schedule by a couple of hours. So we'll see how that goes. There will be episodes. They just might be a little bit later than usual. We will talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.